We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis.
Ghana has reached agreement with the International Monetary Fund on terms for a second payment of $600 million out of its $3 billion credit deal. Ghana signed a deal with the IMF in December as the country sought to shore off its public finances and better manage debt. The country's economic situation will be a major election campaign theme as it heads to the ballot box next year. Major cocoa and gold producer, Ghana also has oil and gas reserves.
These workers say they haven't been paid in 2 years. They supply food to public schools in Ghana. Now desperate, suppliers are demanding what's owed to them with interest because of inflation.
We just are asking that the due process should be followed and our money should be given to us. Are we asking for too much?
We took a deliberate decision to give Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity to grow outside our borders. And one of the places that we looked for this opportunity to grow is in Ghana.
We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis.
Let's head to West Africa now, where the International Monetary Fund has approved a $3 billion bailout programme aimed at boosting Ghana's economy. The country has been battling its worst economic crisis in a generation. It's been hit by soaring inflation, high debt and a devaluing currency. But the country was once one of the continent's rising economic stars as a major global producer of commodities like gold and cocoa. So what exactly went wrong? Well, let's speak now to Bright Simons, who's a Ghanaian entrepreneur and business analyst and joins us now. Thank you for being with us. Let me put that question to you first of all. What went wrong with the big economic dream that Ghana was doing pretty well?
Well, it all starts with how Ghana became a rising star, and that was sometime in 2006. It got one of the biggest debt relief packages ever. The second largest in Africa, actually. $4.5 billion of its debt was wiped out, nearly 75% of its entire debt stock. That meant that it couldn't all of a sudden borrow from international capital markets. It also discovered oil in 2007 and started producing in 2010. Combining all of those revenues together meant it could invest in large infrastructure projects, which then transformed the fortunes of the country. So that is how Ghana became a rising star. Unfortunately, we borrowed too much, until eventually in 2014, it had to turn to the IMF for a bailout. That bailout simply allowed it to go back to the capital markets and borrow even more. So by 2019, thereabouts, it was starting to spend more than 60% of all its income, government income, domestic income, on servicing that debt. And by 2022, when this crisis hit, 75% or more of all government income was now going to servicing debt. So that's how Ghana fell from grace.
We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis.
We took a deliberate decision to give Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity to grow outside our borders. And one of the places that we looked for this opportunity to grow is in Ghana.
We are in a crisis.
The International Monetary Fund approved a $3 billion loan program to Ghana. The 3-year program, which includes an immediate disbursement of about $600 million, provides a lifeline to the country facing its worst economic crisis in a generation.
Let's start the hour with a focus on public debt. It has here across Africa. Ethiopia has been the latest country to plunge into default after it failed to honor a $33 million payment on its Eurobond when it came due on the 11th of December. Zambia and Ghana found themselves in the exact same situation. Now, what has followed in debt restructuring and economic reform has often led citizens and broad sectors of the economy in a great deal of pain. Ghana, in more ways than one, has become the poster child for just how challenging and painful debt reform in Africa can be. Nabil Ahmed Rufai starts us off at this hour.
Ghana began the year owing $65 billion with a debt-to-GDP ratio of more than 90%. The World Bank warns that anything above 77% is likely to hamper economic growth. The unsustainable debt meant that Ghana had to seek a bailout from the International Monetary Fund to help its economy recover. The government undertook a debt restructuring program which aimed to exchange more than 40% of its local debt for new bonds amidst stiff pushback from creditors. The government did finalize its domestic debt restructuring. In May, it secured approval for a $3 billion IMF bailout, paving way for the transfer of a first tranche of $600 million of the loan. The Paris Club, the US government, and the German government, who all form part of Ghana's bilateral creditors, have agreed to some form of debt exchange.
The biggest chunk of our debt now is commercial paper under the Eurobond. Now, that debt is owed to commercial entities who have no geopolitical forbearance for Ghana.
Like Zambia and Kenya, which are also reeling under high debt distress, Ghana has yet to finalize the restructuring of its external debts. In the midst of a wide-scale debt restricting program, Ghana's economy continues to take a hit from high inflation and the weakening local currency. The government also had to implement some IMF conditions, including utility tariff hikes and introducing new taxes to shore up revenue generation. But the implementation of the IMF conditions has further worsened the living conditions of Ghanaians, prompting a series of protests. The IMF has urged the government to slow down the tax reforms.
We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis.
We took a deliberate decision to give Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity to grow outside our borders. And one of the places that we looked for this opportunity to grow is in Ghana.
We are in a crisis.
What this means is that Ghana is going to submit a program of activities to the IMF, which the IMF has to approve, and then offer us some money, which essentially for the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to be guided by Big Brother IMF. And this position because, okay, this is the 17th time we've come to the IMF. So you need that history. Since 1957, we've been to the IMF 16 times. The last time was in 2015, April. We just finished in 2018, December. Why are we in this position? It's a combination of poor economic management and then global issues.
We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis.
We took a deliberate decision to give Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity to grow outside our borders. And one of the places that we looked for this opportunity to grow is in Ghana. One of the places that we looked for this opportunity to grow is in Ghana.